You get to know, like I tweak it. If I know something about the person or the business, like I had last Friday, I had 40 Chinese that didn't speak English. And I had a translator that the company provided. I got this business from a company in China, a travel agency. And they brought their own translator, which was great, but it was sort of a funny feeling because I would say something, then they would translate it, so I had a delayed reaction to what I was saying. It was a very strange feeling, but I knew that they were bankers. So I did a lot of research into what certain paintings and sculptures, the value would be now.
Welcome to the Velstrat podcast, powered by Velocity Strategics. I'm excited to introduce Ellen Greenberg, a former production designer turned entrepreneur who founded Quick Culture to solve the problem of museum fatigue, building a successful niche business that transforms how people consume and appreciate art. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today and taking some time out of your busy day.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So if you can tell us a little bit about how you got into what you are doing now.
It was a circuitous route, but still all had to do with art. I went to art school and I learned about interior design. And I always loved costume design, even from a little kid, like 6 years old, making clothing for my dolls. But anyway, I started doing interior design, and one of my clients was a commercial film production company, and he said, I'm just got a new client and I'm really nervous and I have to do a set, and could you do it? And I'd never done anything for film, and he said, and you can't be fancy, you can't be as nice as my house, it has to look like Mr. and Mrs. Everybody. So, which was a pretty tall order because I was only doing upscale kind of work. And he said, it's got to look like J.C. Penney. Can I say that? it's got to look like,
if you need to.
It's got to look like J.C. Penney, like, Mr. Everybody. So it was for a cough syrup that I probably shouldn't say which one, but it's a national cough syrup. And it was fascinating. I was really fascinated by the whole process. And he got bigger, and as he got bigger, I got bigger, and then I had to make a decision to move out to LA because I didn't want to just do commercials the rest of my life. So I got the bug, and I went out to LA, and I had a difficult time because there were so many people that wanted to do what I was doing. It was like, how am I going to stand out from all these other people that want to be an art director or a costume designer? And I had two little kids, and I figured, it was difficult for them to move. And we went to a fish store, and I bought fish for them, thinking, well, that'll give them some responsibility, and it would help to make a house a home. And then I got this idea that I went back to the fish store, and I bought 25 fish, all in the plastic bags, and I attached my resume to it, and I wrote on the bag, fishing for a job. So, so I picked out 25 different production companies that I thought, well, maybe this will show my creativity, and I will stand out. And I dropped them off, and within a week I had work. So that's my LA story.
That's very cool. That's a good way to stand out. I think that actually was probably what nailed what helped you win that interview.
Well, I think I offer it freely to anyone who's listening. That I think that I don't know if they still sell fish in plastic bags anymore, but I think that would be a great way you can steal it. Anybody can steal it.
That's funny. And so from that job to where you are now with Quick Culture, something made you. There was some sort of catalyst somewhere.
Yes. There was a huge catalyst.
What is that made Ellen say, I want to start my own business, and there's a hole in the market? And I'm not going to lie, when I was a kid, I do remember loving going to the museum, but I think there is some museum fatigue out there. So
Yes.
How is it that you got into what you are doing now, and what is how does it make the experience different to those folks that get to experience a museum now?
Good question. Well, what happened really was I did make it in the film business. I went from commercials. I did TV, I did documentaries, I did a couple films, I even did theater. And then I realized, especially in LA, but anywhere that anyone's in the film business, there's a certain amount of ageism. And so I had gone, my last interview, which you might find amusing, is I got a script, and it was very much like Glengarry Glen Ross, but it was used cars instead of real estate. And it was very raw language, but I wasn't looking at it for that. I was looking at it for what would my job be, which was costume design. My agent had sent me out. I went to see the director, and there were a bunch of people waiting. He was interviewing a lot of people, and the director to me looked like he was 12 years old. And I must have looked like I was 112 years old. So he said to me, did you read the script? I said, yes. He said, well, there's some rough language in that. Were you offended? And I said, no, I'm not looking at it for the language. I'm looking at it for the costuming and what I can do. And you have some very colorful characters here. So he said to me, well, do you think that you can do something contemporary? He said, as far as clothing, I mean, do you know what's happening now? And I realized then that he was looking at me like I was his grandmother. So I said to him, listen, I said, let's say you were doing a piece on the 17th century. I said, would I have to come in here dressed like I'm from the 17th century in order to convince you? I said, this is a period of time like anything else. And I don't have to dress or be that way to know what to do. I said, I don't think this is going to work. And I got up, I walked out, I called my agent. I said, don't ever send me on anything like this. And I said to myself, I better start looking for something else. So I had friends that were docents at one of the museums here in LA, and they said, we think you'll like this. I said, but I'm not making any money, but okay. So I became a docent at one of the museums here and in LA, and people started coming up to me. Oh, I don't want to be with the public. Do you do tours by private tours? And I went, well, there's a business here. So I started to do private tours. The museum didn't like that I was doing private tours. Don't ask me why. I was working with them for free, but
Yeah.
they were dictating what I do in my own time. But I was very fortunate because one of my first clients was a writer for the LA Times. And she came out and did a 2-page spread in the LA Times. And that really helped launch the business. And then I added a couple other museums to it. And I found that art educators usually in museums talk way above the heads of the people. And they pontificate, and I'm a storyteller, basically. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about the art, I ask a lot of questions, and I'm hoping, and even today, I'm hoping, and I've been in it 20 years, I'm hoping that people walk away from seeing a painting or a sculpture and look at it a little bit differently. So that's sort of my goal, and when I talk about it, as far as storytelling, it's in the context of what was going on in the world at the time when this artist did it. What did they do to become famous? How did they become famous? What was it that set them apart? There are a lot of very talented people that don't become famous. And so I try to inject that into it. And also the fact that when you look at a work of art, you're really reading the painting. Because when you start to think about it, before there were print or books or whatever, people communicated by imagery. Think of cave paintings,
That's right.
hieroglyphics, cuneiform, all of that. And so I try to have people not look at the labels that the museum has on there and go for them to read the painting. So, boy, that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
No, that was good. That's kind of what we're looking for here. So
Yeah.
real quick, what is a docent for those who don't know? I don't know.
A
what that is.
docent is someone who takes groups around from the museum, like they'll have certain times. We're doing the highlights of the collection, but they're not paid. They're volunteer.
Okay.
So the difference is I get paid,
Okay, I see.
and they're volunteers, but I offer a private tour where when you go to a museum, you may join in with 20 or 25 people walking
Ah,
around. And some people get intimidated by that. They don't
right.
want to ask a question. And I make it a little more intimate where they feel comfortable asking a question, and they don't think,
Ah,
oh, they ask a dumb question, And then I ask them, I always tell them from the very beginning, there are no dumb answers, there are no stupid questions. We're going to have a dialogue and a conversation about the art. I'm not going to lecture.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think I'm familiar with this kind of work. I was in Hakuba in Japan for a
Mhm.
snowboarding trip not too long ago, and we went to one of the temples that is out there. And I'm not sure if she was a docent, or I think we paid her. She was not a docent because we did pay her. I do remember giving her some cash, but it was more personalized and
Mhm.
it was more intimate, and that vibe that you kind of get from having somebody like yourself present something that you know nothing about. I was very, didn't know anything about the temple. It was the
Yeah.
family Honda, and it was ancient temple, and it was actually pretty spiritual. This is very cool. So it's
Mhm.
interesting that that's something that I've heard of the volunteers. I would assume now that going off of what you're saying, it's much more enjoyable experience to have somebody privately give you the go around of a museum.
Yeah, it is. And you get to know, like, I tweak it. If I know something about the person or the business, like I had last Friday, I had 40 Chinese that didn't speak English. And I had a translator that the company provided. I got this business from a company in China, a travel agency. And they brought their own translator, which was great, but it was sort of a funny feeling because I would say something, then they would translate it, so I had a delayed reaction to what I was saying. It was a very strange feeling. But I knew that they were bankers.
Ah,
So I did a lot of research into what certain paintings and sculptures, what the value would be now, So if I looked at a Renaissance painting, I'd say, and this is what so and so paid for it, and or the museum, I say, and this is what they think it would go for auction now. And the bankers love that. They want to know what everything cost. Another uh, example is that went into this pavilion, this decorative arts pavilion, and they had these coffers that were from Louis the 14th. And they said, "What are those things?" I said, "Well, they're coffers and they were used instead of banks because there were no banks then. So when anybody switched residences or they left, they took all of their wealth with them. So they kept on moving it around because there were no such things as safety deposit. There wasn't even paper money then. So the first bank in France wasn't until 1718. So Louis the 14th was way before that. So they were just fascinated by the fact that there weren't banks. So
that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah, so anyway, I just inject those. If I know who they are, I will tweak the tour to
See,
their
you're
interest.
already educating us. That's pretty cool. I had no idea. What was the date one more time? It was 17 what?
1718 was
1718 was the
this was
first
in
time you had fame.
France. Now this was in France,
In France,
and
right.
yeah, and what was interesting about this is that it was really a Scotsman who had gone to France and he was fleeing from killing a man in London, and he went to France and somehow got involved with telling them that they should have credit and they should have paper money, and it was like a whole new concept to the French. And they were in the process of buying the Louisiana Purchase in the United States, and so they sold shares. But the whole thing the bubble burst, and he fled, and they don't even know where he went. But he fled. But he gave them the idea. A man from Scotland gave him
Okay.
the idea, and then 1718 they opened up a bank, and he was
Huh.
there 1716.
Wow, that is very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting into quick culture and
Yes.
being able to educate all these folks with this cool history, there must have been a North Star. I think you did touch on the fact that somebody was asking you, hey, I would like to have a private tour, or do you do
Yeah.
them? But there must have been a grander vision, right? To do maybe something to do something that you love because you are obviously a historian, and kind of make a living from it and have a fun life to be able to just kind of talk about what you like and do so out of the workplace. Your office is the museum, so that's something that not a lot of people can say or do, right? So what was the North Star? What was the grand vision when you thought to yourself, I'm going to do this?
Well, it's interesting. I've really thought about it since you mentioned that to me, what it is that I really enjoy. Because some people have said to me, aren't you bored doing the same tour all the time? And I said, no, because it's different people. I said, and I get different reactions and different feedback. And so I think it really is about the people. I think that's what the North, meeting people from all over the world.
Okay.
And just to give you an example, when I did do the Chinese people last week, so it was 40 people, and I have a woman that works with me. She's very bright, and I trained her in the way I give tours. And she is originally Russian, but she's American. So here we have these Chinese people, which with the U.S., it's not exactly great relationship between China and the U.S. Then we have her, who's Russian, and then my translator was Taiwanese. And the Taiwan and China are not exactly together. And you know what? Everything fell away. We were just all human beings enjoying looking at art. And that was the one thing that united us and made us realize they were all just human beings. Look, I have a thing about, you take politics out of the equation, you take even religion out of the equation, and people are all the same. And so that, I think, is my North Star. It's people.
So you're almost not just educating folks, but you kind of building relationships or helping folks bond that maybe didn't think they would, or you're kind of pulling down the facade of socioeconomics, nation, skin color, religion through art.
Yes, and it's so fascinating to hear the different. Like we have one at the Getty, where I do a lot of my tours, the Getty Center. Their prized possession is Van Gogh's irises. And if you would see this painting, and you're welcome to go look at it, anybody who's listening, there's one white iris in a sea of bluish purple irises. And it's the last thing that I do. And I said, what do you think the one white iris symbolizes? Because Vincent van Gogh did this painting the first week that he was in a mental asylum in the south of France, where he committed himself. He walked in, I'm sick, help me. And he did this the first week. And the answers I get, most of them are pretty on target, where they say, oh, that must be him. He feels different. He's the one white. But I had, and then someone says, oh, it's hope, or it's purity, and I get all different answers. But I had one answer from a 15-year-old kid that really was set apart. He said, if I were going into a mental asylum and I was voluntarily going, he said, I think the one white iris means I give up, I surrender. It was the white flag to him. Okay. So this is what makes it so fascinating. All the different answers that you get from people, and it brings out what's inside them.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I think that, and for those who are, there's a big population out there, a good number of people that don't really get into art, into a museum. There's folks that have never stepped into a museum before.
Oh, yeah.
And can't learn that appreciation until you have it right in front of you, and especially having someone like yourself explain it, break it down, and the history of it, and the lessons that come along with it. I mean, art is created, out of strife or celebration or victory or some extreme case in the human condition, usually, I think. Yes. So when, and the older the art is, the more, I want to say more raw. It's a little bit more raw. It's a little bit more grounded than it is today. Today, there's so much going on. There's so much social media. There's a lot of influence. I don't think polluted is the right word as far as influence what goes into the art that comes out today. But nowadays, you see some things that are so silly. They're just I think the one I saw in Art Basel when I used to live out in Miami Beach, there was a guy, just to mess with people, he got a banana, he put some duct tape on it, and he just
Oh,
stuck
I
it on a
saw
wall.
that. I
And people
saw
are
that.
just like, that's not art. That's the stupidest thing ever, you know? Or for shock value, Banksy, who's super talented, you know, he had that art
Yes.
piece, and then the guy buys it for I don't know how many millions of dollars, and then he shreds it right after the auction was over. So these are the things that I feel like would you know, these are the things that they're influenced from the outside world for notoriety and whatnot, and the art and the history that goes along with it. From that's something that you find in a museum. I'm talking about older art here.
Yeah.
It's something that it's very it feels like it's a little bit closer to the heart. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's interesting. I'm formulating a new tour at the LA County Museum of Art, and it's just the evolution of modern art, because I think that's what you're just saying. That's what turns people off. You know, this is art, the banana that's on a, and it's interesting the evolution of why certain art becomes famous. Like and anybody can see this. They can go online, but but a lot of people don't know about it. And that is during the Cold War, the United States really wanted to fight communism, and they were stretching about what they can do. And there's this one man who decided that we have to contact people and communicate through art, because the United States was viewed as a cultural wasteland. They thought all we knew how to do was make chewing gum and cowboy movies and television sets. So he had the idea of bankrolling certain artists that it would be truly American art. And that's how abstract expressionism, Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, Mark Rothko, they all did this abstract art that couldn't be called political. You just look at it and it's abstract. And the CIA funded them. They had no idea that they were being funded by the CIA through dummy corporations, and they became famous. And American art, contemporary American art, the center of it shifted. They were successful. Shifted from Paris to New York. New York is now considered the center of contemporary art world. And it all was because that in the 1950s, these artists were bankrolled by the CIA. So
You must
anybody,
have so many returning guests. This is awesome. I love this.
anybody can look it
I
up.
can listen to you talk about this all day.
Google Jackson Pollock CIA, and you won't believe what happens.
Jackson
You won't
Pollock,
believe CIA. You won't believe what you will find out. Because there was a certain, it was called the Church investigation, I believe, where it all came out that this was done. And Tom Braden was the person whose idea it was. Tom Braden was a newscaster. He was a TV reporter. He was in with the Georgetown set at the time. He was an unbelievable guy. I mean, I was like falling in love with him as I was writing the script. I wrote a script that will be like, hopefully I could sell it, but who knows. But it's like a 6-part miniseries of how this happened, you know, and some of the crazy people that were in the CIA and some of the ideas that they came up with to fight communism. It's almost laughable. But maybe if we were in some of the things that happen in today's government, we would laugh too. Or cry.
My goodness. You took the words right out of my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch lanes here for a little bit, Ellen. I love everything that you told us so far because it's very educational.
Okay.
And the history, I'm a huge history buff. I grew up, you know, watching like History Channel and Discovery with my dad since I was a little kid. So I can sit here and listen to you talk all day about all this stuff. I'm actually.
So you didn't watch the Power Rangers, which was one of my. I was the production designer on the Power.
I did watch the Power Rangers. My
Yes.
mom was in Toys R Us at 6 a.m. buying me the Red Ranger. Yeah, it was like madness back in the days. You had to like buy everything at the store. But I was a fanatical Power Rangers fan.
Oh, I did 2 seasons. I was the production designer on that show.
So you worked with the actual like actors that were the teenagers, like
No, here's the thing that's interesting that maybe you don't know. I mean, Saban was brilliant, all right, because what he did is he bought a series in Japan.
Yep.
And what he did is that he had Americans, he took pieces of it and he put it together with American actors. So it was very inexpensive production, really inexpensive. You know, maybe he had 15 minutes or less of filming that most of it came from Japan that he had bought.
Yeah.
So it was really a brilliant thing because they wore the helmets and you didn't know what they looked like. So he would build a story around it. So it was really pretty brilliant what he did.
Yeah,
So,
that's actually a really cool story. He paid it like pennies on the dollar, and he would just so he did get the American actors to be the teenagers in Angel
Yes.
City, which is where the show is based, this fictional city. Did you work with the actors that were the American actors for the show?
yes, yes.
Did you work with like Amy Jo Johnson and like
Yeah,
all
but,
like
but I did
Trini
mostly,
and
once I
Lily?
did the set, I like walked away as the production designer. Then you've got people, the set decorators on set. You've got other people that are on set. Once the set is built, my job is done. So a lot of times I didn't actually stay for the filming because, believe it or not, it's pretty boring to watch.
You
the
think so?
filming. Oh yeah, over and over and over again. And then I did a soap for a while. And I was the costume designer, and after the costumes were done, I was out of there. I let people, I used to call it lint picking. I would let them lint pick, and be on set. So I really didn't like being on set. I liked all the creative part before it, but I wasn't crazy about being on set.
Okay, and so the production design, does that mean that you design like that's just for the set where where
The
like
production
like where it's
designer,
staged?
all right, the hierarchy is the production designer is responsible for the look of the show. So
Okay.
I would be the boss over the costume designer and over the art director. And so I would make sure that a woman was not sitting on, I would make sure that they knew, well, she's going to be wearing a striped dress. You better not have her sit on a floral couch, So they would have to get together. So I coordinated and I was responsible for the look of the whole show.
Okay, so please tell me that you helped design the command center where Zordon lived and resided.
No,
and
because a
lived
lot
and-
of that was replicated from the Japanese.
I see.
Some of that was replicated, but
Okay.
I did do a lot of other stuff. But that stuff was replicated.
That is so very cool. I think that at my generation at least, was back when we were growing up, TV. There's we had like a bunch of channels, but when you came home from school, the show was Power Rangers. Everyone watched Power Rangers, and even
Yeah.
girls were into it because it had the Pink Ranger and the Yellow Ranger and all that.
Oh,
That is
yeah,
so very interesting. So
I think
you
it was shot in Santa Clarita when it was here in LA.
Mhm.
And I think now they shoot it in either New Zealand or Australia. I don't know if it's still in the air actually.
I think they stopped making new like variations of the Power Rangers because they had many like iterations of them as they went
Yeah.
on. I mean, I'm not
Yes.
going to nerd out in here to tell you all of them, even though I know them by heart. But yeah, they did make a couple of them. I think they stopped making them a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not so much in that like entertainment. It's not what I look for in entertainment anymore. But
Well, I
it
haven't
did
been
last
to
for
entertainment.
quite a long time. It lasted for well over 20 years, I want to say.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was around a little, but I only did 2 seasons, so I'm not
Okay.
going to tell you why I
Still pretty
quit.
cool. Okay,
But-
and that's not your only claim to fame. You've also worked with Netflix. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Netflix they've taken my tours. I didn't work for Netflix
I
because
see.
I quit 20 years ago, the film industry. But they've gone on my tours as Nickelodeon has, Paramount has. They've done it for team building. They'll go to the so
Very cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've gone over the very interesting parts of your career. You've given us some excellent history and some really cool history on entertainment that some of the folks watching this are definitely going to find something to nerd out about.
Okay.
But if you can tell us a little bit about what was the greatest challenge that you overcame, let's say, whether it was in production in Hollywood or your career that you started when you started this company, Quick Culture, and doing the private museum tours?
I think what it was raising a family and also having, a business that I was trying to, you know, do more and more of and figuring out different ideas. And I have 3 children. And so it was hard to integrate that into, being there for them, being there for my boss. And I have many people say, "Oh, that's great. You worked for yourself. You just worked on a film and then you went to." I said, "No." I said, "I don't have one boss. I have like 1,000 bosses
Yeah.
because every job you have a boss." And I think my challenge, though, getting back to your original thing, was trying to mesh being there for my children and also making money, and supporting myself. And I still struggle with that. And my kids are grown, but I still struggle with the fact that I wasn't around as much as I could have been or should have been or was at that time. So that to me was my biggest struggle, to be honest.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think, if I may, my mom was a single mother, and she helped raise me in a way that I don't even think. Even she now tells me that she didn't know how she did it. She's like, "I don't know how I figured it out because it was just the two of us." But looking back now, and I'm sure that anyone else who is in my position as someone's son, and anyone that is looking back at their parents, their moms, like, I think folks can beat themselves up, but in all honesty, I would say that everyone does the best that they can, and I'm sure that they're lucky to have you.
That's very sweet. Thank you.
Of course, absolutely, it's the truth.
I would like you to call them right now.
Okay, well,
Yes.
Ellen, thank you so much for your story and telling us how everything that you've done from Hollywood to museum historian and how do you tour guide, right?
Yeah.
First
No,
and
I
foremost-
like art historian. You could
Yeah,
study.
art
Yeah.
historian. Okay, from when you started in Hollywood as a production designer and art historian, and everything else in between, including the personal life. I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day. You are your story, I think, is super interesting because it's to be a historian. It takes a lot of knowledge to be able to just walk around a museum and kind of elucidate, anyone who's part of your group about the ongoings of our history. History is one of the most important things, I think, because if you don't know your history, you are doomed to repeat it. And unfortunately, if you take a look around or in the news, we're heading right for it. It's coming right at us, and we don't know it because folks aren't educated and are not aware and are tripping over the same tree branch over and over again, which is unfortunate. But I just wanted to say thank you for your time and your knowledge as a historian, as an art historian, telling us about your history, about your production design career, but most importantly, as a mother that was able to raise 3 kids, balancing the work life. So that's, I think, in my opinion, that's I think the more important part in this episode that we have today, because there's a lot of folks that whether or not they can use, let's say, any solution that you use to solve your problems or overcome any of your hurdles in your respective industry, it's the mindset that kind of takes to that they can adopt to apply in their own industry, and that's something that I think is important because there's an underlying current between all the episodes under all the episodes that we like to do here, and that is that kind of you gotta kind of be gritty and just not give up. And sometimes that's all that somebody needs to hear and see and hear, that somebody else did it and they did so successfully, even if they don't give themselves the credit that is due. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it was a pleasure, talking about things that I usually don't talk about. And one thing that you said about like history repeating itself, one of my favorite authors of all time is Mark Twain.
Yes.
And he said something really interesting. He said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
I like that.
And I thought that was really interesting remark because there's always something a little different about it. You know, there's a familiarity to things that repeat, but they don't always exactly
Right.
repeat itself.
Very true.
That's
Ellen,
my words
once
of
again,
wisdom.
I appreciate. Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. This has been one of the cooler episodes. I love it. All the
Thank
way from
you.
the production design to the Power Ranger stuff to the art history, and you know, you actually showing folks how to balance the work life and to raise 3 kids with 2 jobs and having, you know, all the bosses that you say you had. That's actually a very
Yeah.
cool story. It's very interesting. I don't think people give themselves enough credit where they can be somebody not unlike yourself listening to this and are kind of beating themselves up. So there's a moral to this episode, a moral in the story of this
One
episode.
thing I do want to add that really changed my life, and that is I always wanted to be in the art world, but I thought because I couldn't draw, because somehow, even though I was creative here, it didn't come out in my hands. And I thought if I couldn't draw, I couldn't be an artist. And I had a very dear friend who is a very successful artist. And he said to me, Ellen, he says, I know a lot of people that can draw, but they don't have a creative thought in their head. He said, so being creative, he said, is an art unto itself. So don't beat yourself up because it doesn't go to your hands from your head. So I just anybody who's listening out there, don't beat yourself up because maybe you have a different definition of whatever it is that you want to do in life. So
I like it.
that's it. All right.
So Ellen Greenberg, production designer, art historian, but most importantly, mother. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Velstrat podcast powered by Velocity Strategics. Thank you everyone for watching and have a good one.
Thank you.